Good Saturday morning, Alabama fans, and welcome into week 7 of the college football season. This is the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Matt Scalisi. It's a new week. The world has not ended, although it felt like a week ago it was going to from the Tide's perspective. The last thing I'm going to say on this show, I have decided, is that any game is a gimme. That was big rat poison by me last week. I said that 7 days ago about this time, talking about the Alabama-Texas A&M game. That was a mistake, and I apologize for that. So I wanted to
our pregame show from a week ago is hanging out there like the most incriminating evidence against me and you as it could possibly be.
It really is. But a lot of folks in the comments, they weren't necessarily arguing with us at that point. So everyone wants to go ahead and take those comments back at this point. All right, guys, we're not going to spend too much time recapping last week. We're just going to take a brief look back at kind of the wake-up call that Alabama got, what that means going into this Mississippi State game today. Alabama kicks off against the Bulldogs. It's a night game in Starkville. I've been in this atmosphere before. It's kind of a fun one in Starkville. I mean, if you can get over the cowbells, fans get going a little bit. Obviously, Mississippi State fans are kind of like sharks that can like smell blood. They feel like they have a chance now. A&M had a chance. They, took advantage of their chance at home. Now Mississippi State wants to like be the next little shark that says, okay, we can strike next. Matt, not so easy because Alabama is really, really good at rebounding when it comes to dealing with the loss.
Yeah, let me just tell you, you don't want to be the second shark to arrive at Alabama after the first guy took a bite. This is historically a program that their main opponent, their biggest enemy, is their own complacency and their own inability to get themselves properly motivated. Mm-hmm. And we saw what happened last week. Nick Saban was anticipating it. He'd been saying all season long he didn't think the team had the right level of intensity. And his prediction came true last week. But historically, when that happens, it is the wake-up call that the program needs. They take the next week incredibly seriously. They refocus. Mm-hmm. Everybody plays with a different level of ferocity out there, and you don't like to be the next guy on the list when that happens. So we'll see. Look, this team has legitimate issues too, I think, beyond just the level of focus and intensity they play with. But I think if there was any chance that Mississippi State was going to catch Alabama sleeping, that chance went out the window last weekend when Texas A&M pulled that off.
Yes, if there's any coach in the country, it's Nick Saban, who can get guys to turn around. Only 18 losses for the Tide since 2008. In 15 of those games, Alabama has been able to bounce back with by an average margin of more than 22 points. So if anyone knows how to motivate his guys after a loss and use it as a tool to turn the tide, so to speak, it's Nick Saban. He's done it a time or two when he's had to. Lots of things we're going to discuss in the pregame show today, and Matt just kind of alluded to it when it comes to some legitimate issues that the Tide face, some that we really weren't really sure this was going to be a thing, but it has kind of unraveled when it comes to maybe some red zone offense, when it comes to just things offensively and defensively that we really have not seen historically by some Tide programs. Before we get to that, want to bring up this soundbite from Nick Saban on how significant it is to remember the feeling that they had walking off the field last week in College Station.
Players have to remember how they feel when they don't have success. And I think they got to remember how that feels. And then I also think that they have to think about, well, how did what we did sort of contribute to this feeling that I have? And then what am I willing to do to fix it?
So Saban knows that this is a very this is an opportunity for a motivating tool for the Tide moving forward. Matt, we said this last week when we were talking about Texas A&M, not really in a serious note, but one thing that is very serious and very true is that every team in the league is going to give Bama their best. And if you think that Mississippi State isn't looking at this as an opportunity in that locker room to give Bama their best when they look at them as maybe down, you're mistaken. That's exactly what they're going to do tonight at 6.
No question. And as Saban is fond of saying, the other team has good players too. Now, Mississippi State has fewer good players than Texas A&M did a week ago. And I think their margin of error to threaten Alabama is much smaller than Texas A&M's is. But they are a team that I think has been playing with a little bit more of a cohesive idea of who they are. They have an identity as a team in a way that they didn't a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that tends to happen in the second year under a head coach. So that I think is going to be interesting to see. This is a team that knows who it is a little bit more on both sides of the ball now than the Mississippi State team that we saw get totally blown out by Alabama a year ago. And I think even though they are still a long way away from Alabama in terms of recruiting and overall roster talent, it's a team that if you yourself can't figure out what you're doing, if you can't have your own sense of identity and impose it on the other team, Mississippi State can get into a rhythm and get into a groove and do some things to you.
Yeah, no doubt. So will Alabama come out firing? Will they come out on their heels? We'll find out tonight. If you're just tuning in, it's the Alabama Pregame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone. He is Matt. Kickoff in Starkville set for 7 o'clock. Last week at Kyle Field in College Station, one of the big things some folks walked away from that game kind of scratching their head about was some red zone offense, maybe some play calling, Matt. Before we kind of discuss this, it's been the hot topic throughout pretty much everyone in the state. I want to play Nick Saban's bite when he was asked about kind of why they didn't look at the run in certain situations against Texas A&M when they were deep in the red.
I don't know that there's a good answer to that. I don't know if we, challenged them running it as much as maybe we could. And that's one of the things that I think we need to work on trying to improve on.
Okay, for folks who are listening at home and may not know, that is the nicest way in which Nick Saban can say that Bill O'Brien dropped the dang ball and did not do what was necessary to get the ball into the end zone. That is the nicest way that he is going to criticize a former NFL head coach who he has respect for, and say that the play calling in certain situations at Texas A&M just did not happen the way they should have, Matt.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of how he talked about Lane Kiffin back in kind of the earlier years of their collaboration together when Lane was in Tuscaloosa. He's never going to full on chew out an offensive coordinator at a press conference. He'll do it on the sidelines sometimes, which congrats to Bill O'Brien for making the decision to be in the box, because I think otherwise we would have had some interesting footage last week.
Sure.
But the tension, I think, while it feels awkward to us watching, and we all think it must be hard for them to work together. Maybe this is not going to last very long. I think it's kind of important to remember that this tension has actually existed between Nick Saban and basically every coordinator who's ever worked for him. And Simone, I know that you've had opportunities to interview guys who've worked for Nick Saban before. I have too. I've talked to some of them kind of off the record before about it, where they could be a little more free with their feelings. And they all say the same thing, which is he's incredibly smart. You have to listen to him. He definitely knows what he's doing, but man, is he a tough guy to work for. Yeah. And I think that is a universally known thing. I don't think that it's unique to Bill O'Brien. And it's part of how Nick Saban, I think, gets the most out of his coaching staff is he challenges them. He says, are we really doing the best that we can do right now? Are we really making the best decisions to put our team in a position to win? Yeah. I think without that tension, you're not going to see guys innovate and get creative and do different things. Yeah. So it's a normal part of the process, but it definitely feels a little bit awkward, and it leads to moments like this. And as far as what he actually said, I think most of the fans agree. I think a lot of people feel like Alabama didn't play to its strengths in certain situations offensively in College Station, and the result ended up being they left a lot of points on the board, and that's going to be something that they're certainly going to want to address as the season goes on.
Yeah, let it be known, at least in my perspective, that I don't think that there is some big, huge underlying problem between Nick Saban and Bill O'Brien, or really Nick Saban and any of his coaches. I think Nick Saban demands and expects the very best. He's not going to hire a guy, Matt, to come in and mail it in. It doesn't matter where the guy is in his career. It doesn't matter what type of success that he has had at other levels or other schools. He has an expectation level for guys to come in and to be as motivated to win as he is. And if you're not, then you're going to be looking for a job. He makes that very, very clear. And whether that means adjusting to what Saban wants to do, adjusting to what the team needs to do, what their identity is, he's going to get that done. That's why he has won in the ways that he has, Matt. And I know that you have the offensive stats. I want to pull up some numbers here that we have looking at these two teams. It's no question that Alabama can put some points on the board, Matt, but we know that when this Mike Leach-led offense for Mississippi State gets going a little bit, gets into a rhythm, that they can do some things, especially when you're at home and you have the crowds behind you, the fans behind you. There is a potential for things to maybe get a little silly.
Yeah, and I will say, I think there are reasons for Alabama to be cautious and nervous heading into this game when you look at those passing stats, I think particularly because, at this point, Alabama's secondary deserves some suspicion. I think we should all be asking questions about how good this Alabama pass defense is. We thought they were going to be an elite unit, and they've struggled so far against some of the better teams they've faced. And, some of that has to do with guys not being fully healthy, but it is what it is. That's what your unit is. It has to do with depth just as much as the guys at the top. Yeah. And Alabama has not been able to dominate and shut down opposing passing offenses so far this season. Mm-hmm. I think that's also been a concern up front. They just haven't figured things out yet in terms of stopping the run. Now, the good news, as you saw there, is that Mississippi State's rushing attack is definitely not one of the better ones Alabama is going to play this year. Might actually be one of the worst that they play this year. Mm-hmm. So that's at least one area where Alabama should find a little relief this week. They've been getting gashed, particularly in the middle of that defensive front, and shouldn't be as much of a problem. I think Alabama will be able to handle Mississippi State in the trenches. The question is, if Mississippi State starts getting that ball out quickly, if they start running those quick routes, those slants and quick outs that are designed to remove the aspect of pressure from the defense at all, can Alabama's DBs step up and make plays on the ball, make stops, shut down this Mississippi State offense entirely? It's not going to be easy. Even a one-dimensional team at this point can still present issues to this Alabama defense, and they've got a lot to prove today.
Yeah, they certainly do. When you look at games, I don't think it's fair to look really beyond like a head-to-head matchup in these two teams, but it should be noted that Mississippi State did beat Texas A&M, and they did so behind quarterback Will Rogers, who threw for 408 in that game with 3 touchdowns. The sophomore had an incredible outing. And one of the things that Alabama defensive lineman DJ Dale said this week is that the pass rush is going to be so significant, something that Alabama was not able to do on the road at A&M last week. Matt, it was actually rather disappointing. No sacks, no hurries on the stat sheet. Guys like Will Anderson, we're used to them seeing them in the backfield applying pressure, not able to do that. How significant is that going to be for a team that, like you said, is kind of one-dimensional in their pass game? And Will Rogers, again, can put up some numbers when he wants to.
Yeah, they're going to at least need to attempt pressure. Again, this Mississippi State team likes to get the ball out pretty quickly, and you may not get a lot of sacks. You may not get a lot of actual tackles for loss when it comes to the quarterback, but you can still apply pressure even outside of that. And it will be important, I think, to help that Alabama secondary. I don't think we can overlook the fact that Drew Sanders was missing last week. I think we all maybe thought it wasn't going to be as much of an issue as it was, but there was clearly some drop-off, and Alabama has some really talented young guys at those outside linebacker spots that they're subbing in, but they don't have the same level of production right now as Drew Sanders. So those injuries are starting to pile up and become a factor a little bit defensively. They probably are not going to have Drew Sanders again until, possibly even November. So they're going to need to figure it out. They're going to need to get some more production out of the guys on the outside, the edge pass rushers for this defense outside of Will Anderson have to step up and start making plays and contributing. So it's a big moment in a lot of ways for this defense. Again, this is a game Alabama should win, but they still have to do it. They have to actually produce.
They should have won last week.
Yeah. I mean, they have to be more than recruiting stars.
Yeah.
They have to prove that they can do it at this level.
No question. Matt dropping the knowledge this morning on the Alabama pregame show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. Bama kicks off in Starkville, the 5th-ranked Tide. That sounds weird to say. 5th-ranked Tide taking on Mississippi State in a Starkville kickoff set for 6 o'clock on ESPN. Let's talk briefly about Bryce Young. His performance last week was 28 of 48, which is not nearly as efficient as we have seen him in games past this season. 3 scores. That interception, one that he'd love to have back, but it was kind of a sticking point in the press conference this week. Nick Saban was asked about that interception, how he felt Bryce Young bounced back from that, and Coach actually had some pretty encouraging and positive things to say about his young quarterback. Listen in.
But I thought he stayed focused, didn't get upset, and played well in the game. Under the circumstances, I think we handled the noise better. I think his reads were pretty good for the most part. Nobody's perfect when it comes to accuracy, but I thought he did a pretty good job in that regard. So I thought he kept his poise and really, stayed focused on the next play, and I didn't think that affected him.
So strong words there from your head coach. For Nick Saban to say that he kept his poise, his composure, and I think the biggest thing is the crowd noise. I think that he felt as though Alabama was not nearly as impacted by crowd noise like they were maybe in the Florida game, in situations in games past, that they were able to handle the communication throughout the offense a little bit better. Matt, to me, that's a big takeaway for Bryce Young. That's kind of a confidence booster coming off of a game where you did lose. It's your first loss as a starter, a disappointing loss that not a lot of folks expected, where you didn't have a perfect day, but hey, coach still has a lot of confidence in your ability in moving forward.
For sure. And I think it would be wrong, and I haven't really seen anybody doing this, but I don't think anybody should put last week's loss on Bryce Young. I think that it was a full team loss. I think there were issues on both sides of the ball, and you could probably point to some issue in every unit within the offense and defense that led to that loss. But I do think Bryce Young had different problems than he did against Florida, and the whole offense did. I think when you go back and look at the Florida game, it was pre-snap issues, and that does point to crowd noise.
Yeah.
The issues they were having against Texas A&M all happened after the snap.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could say they were failing to identify things pre-snap, but a lot of the problems were happening after the ball was snapped, and then the offensive line suddenly looked like they had no idea what was coming. They didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know who to pass off to who.
Sure.
That there were somewhat communication issues, but I think more it was preparation issues. It was understanding what it was that was happening to you during the play. And, I think that was a little bit surprising to see because there were some experienced guys on that offensive line, and they didn't look experienced last Saturday. So that's going to affect your first-year starting quarterback. No question. Did Bryce Young make brilliant plays when he had pass rushers in his face? No, he didn't. Most quarterbacks wouldn't, even really experienced ones.
Sure.
So he was not put in an ideal situation last week. I don't think he played a terrible game by any means, but I think he needs help. He needs some better play from his offensive line. I think the receivers didn't have their best game a week ago outside of Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
And I think, on top of it, even though we did, I thought overall, really good game for Brian Robinson a week ago. We still need to see some more names getting involved in making big plays at the running back position too. Now that there's been a couple of injuries there, so all around, I get why Nick Saban doesn't want to put too much criticism on Bryce Young at this point. I think if everybody else plays better around Bryce Young, the type of performance he gave last week is going to be enough to get it done in most games.
And that's something that Nick Saban had actually said multiple times going into that game, after many games, where folks have asked, okay, what did you see from Bryce? What did you think about Bryce? And every time coach has been very complimentary of Bryce and really kind of critical of the guys around Bryce, especially the receiving core, sometimes protection, no doubt protection last week. So coach has a lot of confidence in the world in Bryce. I think the fan base does as well. I think that decision-making wise, he's not a big runner, guys. I mean, I know folks want to see him run. And there were
he just ain't going to do it.
The thing is, there were times in against Texas A&M where he did run, Matt, and he looked desperate. He looked like a chicken with his head cut off. It didn't look natural to him because it's not natural to him.
No, it's just not who he is as a quarterback, and that's fine. It wasn't who Mac Jones was either, and Alabama won a national championship.
I couldn't slide either. Good Lord.
That's right.
There were some times I was like, Mac, bro, figure it out.
It's pretty normal, I would say, throughout Saban's tenure, for the quarterback to be the last person that he blames for anything.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get why you would do that. I think football is such a complex activity where you need everything working all at once. Yeah. You know, if Bryce makes a mistake in his reads, that can be fixed pretty quickly. Yeah. And he usually is going to have other options that can present themselves to get him out of that too. I think overall, if you're depending on your first year starting quarterback to make magic happen when the other parts of the team are letting you down, that's not a good plan. And I'm sure that's not how Saban foresees this season going. So he knows that the first places to work on and look at, firstly, it's going to be the coaching staff and how they handle everything. Mm-hmm. But secondly, I think you got to get players playing around Bryce Young to do a better job of executing and protecting him and giving him good options during the play.
Yeah. So this week, a little bit different than weeks past. Alabama on the rebound. The Tide haven't lost a game since the 2019 Iron Bowl.
I like this, Simone, this comment from a fan. We lose one game, we go all the way to number 5. All the way.
Couple things on that. Some teams would love to be number 5. They haven't cracked the top 5 in multiple decades. But quite frankly, I mean, if you think about the teams that are ahead of Alabama, they're all undefeated. Alabama's the highest ranked one-loss team in the country. So there is that. And by the way, the AP poll, you want to know how much it means? Nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Let that be known. It has meant nothing since the playoff began, since the playoff era. And so we will see what things look like when the first playoff standings come out. But it should not be understated, Matt, the opportunity that Alabama has right now, just looking ahead for the Tide. Nick Saban said this in College Station. I don't think we can stress it enough. Everything that Bama has goal-wise, everything that they want to accomplish this season is right there like a beautiful charcuterie board, and Nick Saban's holding the glass of wine. Like everything is laid right there. You just, pick some cheese, pick some meat, do what you want to do, win ball games, move forward, and, get to Atlanta to play Georgia. Everything's right there.
Spoken like a woman who's been to a couple baby showers recently.
No doubt. Spoken like a woman who's like 7 months pregnant and hasn't had charcuterie or wine in way too long.
Yeah, I think the only thing I've been talking to friends and coworkers about this all week about what it actually means for Alabama, that Texas A&M loss, because we know that it didn't suddenly mean that Texas A&M was in the driver's seat in the West. They had already had 2 losses, so it didn't really affect Alabama in that way. The only thing that we could come up with that this cost Alabama was it cost them the opportunity to go into the SEC championship game knowing that they were in the playoffs, whether they won or lost that game. And to be totally honest with you, and I'm going to sound like I'm sunshine pumping here, but I don't think Nick Saban would like that. I don't think Nick Saban even would like the opportunity for his team to play a meaningless SEC championship game, that they'd be in the playoffs whether they won it or not. I mean, that's that is a recipe for having an unmotivated team.
No
and no, look, would everybody watching this right now feel better if they had a margin of error for anything they were trying to do?
Sure.
Of course, you would feel comfortable. Does that mean that you're going to be at your best because you're comfortable for the rest of the year? Probably not. I think Nick Saban probably feels like his team is going to be giving better effort. It's going to be performing at a higher level when they feel like they have no other choice but to do that. And like it or not, that's where they are now. But I think we may end up looking back at this and saying this was kind of a blessing in disguise for Alabama.
We will find out very quickly here in just a few hours. Alabama kicks off at 6 o'clock Central, just over the state border there in Mississippi State in Starkville. 6 o'clock, the kickoff. Fifth-ranked Tide looking to bounce back after that loss to Texas A&M. Guys, enjoy your Saturday. You have a couple hours to hang out. Auburn plays at 11. A couple other teams play at 11 o'clock. That 2:30 game is a big one. Kentucky against Georgia, Matt. So if you're a Bama fan, you're getting to chill for a little bit, get you some buffalo chicken dip, hang out, and just enjoy your college football Saturday for right now.
Get you a charcuterie board.
Charcuterie board. Yes. Yeah. Get the Gouda. All right, y'all. Well, enjoy this one. Matt and I will join you for the post-game show this evening as Alabama takes on Mississippi State. Week 7 of the college football season already. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Alabama Pregame Show, brought to you by Medical Properties Trust.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.